Hello students, my name is Chef Brian Peffley. I teach pastry arts at the Lebanon County Career and Technology Center. Today what we are going to go over is how to make pie dough, then make a crumb pie, and then it's going to be followed up by taking that shell, and then later on in another demo we're going to make chocolate cream pie. So before I get started, I already wiped and sanitized my table, and I've already washed my hands. So let's go ahead and get started. The items that you're going to need to prepare the pie dough are gloved hands, stainless steel bowl, a pastry blender, bowl scraper, bench knife, pie tin, rolling pin, dusting flour, some saran wrap. The ingredients you'll need to make the pie dough: 6.5 ounces of pastry flour, 1 ounce of sugar, 1/4 teaspoon of salt, 5.25 ounces of butter, unsalted, 1/2 teaspoon of lemon, that's the lemon juice, and then finally 2.25 to 2.5 ounces of cold water. There are many different recipes and varieties to make pie dough. One of the most common is the 3-2-1 method. That would be 3 parts flour, 2 parts fat, and 1 part ice water. This recipe is actually in line with our Pennsylvania Skill Standard for pastry, which would be 505. And also this is one of the skills that you might possibly be doing in your NOCD final exam. To get started, I have my pastry flour in my bowl. The first thing I'm going to add is my fat. This recipe calls for butter, so I'm going to add that in. The next thing I want to do is I want to use my pastry blender. If you don't have a pastry blender, you can certainly use 2 knives or 2 forks. They work as well. But I'm going to use my pastry blender, and the goal is I'm going to try to cut my fat into my flour. So the goal is to make sure that I have my fat cut in pea sizes in my flour. So I'm just going to go ahead and constantly be cutting this in. Before I got started, if you notice on my table, I have some saran wrap laid out. It's always critical to make sure that you're planning ahead in production, that you know your next step. While I'm making this, you're going to notice that my hands are going to start to get really gunged up with dough, and I want to make sure that I keep myself clean. After this dough is made, I'm going to transfer it into saran wrap. So we might as well go ahead and have that saran wrap ready to go and receive our finished dough prior to us getting started. So I'm going to go ahead and cut that into a pea size or a mealy look, what I'm looking for. I have my sugar, my salt. I'm going to add it to my water, which is ice cold. I remove the ice. I'm also going to put my salt in here. I'm also going to squeeze in a little bit of lemon juice for an acid. And I'm going to stir that together. And I'm going to add almost all of this to my dough. Now I'm going to go ahead and press my flour together to form my dough. I added the remainder of the flour, and I'm going to continue to press this nice and flat, trying to create layers in the dough. As you can see, as I'll take the dough out, and if I take it and I break it apart, you can see that I have created layers inside that dough. Those layers that I'm creating will end up creating the flakiness that you desire in a crust. From here, I'm going to take this dough, flatten it out, and I'm going to transfer it from my bowl onto my saran wrap. Just going to go ahead and add this all in, flatten it out. And I always encourage my students that when you're making the pie dough, that you flatten it into the desired shape that you're going to end up rolling. Since we are going to be ending up to be rolling this round into a pie, I'm going to go ahead and flatten this out, and then I'm going to take my saran wrap and move this to the center so I end up with one nice round mass. Pie dough you don't want to form into a ball and then try to roll it out. It's much easier to roll it out. So from here, after I have this all nicely wrapped up, you can see now why I wanted to make sure I had my saran wrap ready to go and receive the dough. Now from here, I'm going to wrap this nice and tight. I'm going to put it in the refrigerator for about 15 minutes so it can chill, and then we'll go into rolling it out and creating the pie shells. While my pie dough is refrigerating, I'm going to go ahead and start working on my pie crumbs. The ingredients you will need are 2 ounces of brown sugar, a half an ounce of regular sugar, a half a cup of oats, a pinch of salt, 3/4 teaspoon of cinnamon, a half a cup of flour, 2 ounces of unsalted butter, and 3/4 teaspoon of vanilla extract. To make my pie crumbs, it's very simple. We take our flour bowl and we go ahead and we add all the ingredients inside that bowl. That would be our sugar, our brown sugar, our oats, our salt, our ground cinnamon, our vanilla, and finally our butter. Then all I want to do is take this and just rub it with my hands and slowly create the crumbs. Being careful not to overmix or undermix. So I'm going to just gently rub the ingredients in my hands and start forming these crumbs. This butter was at room temperature, so it's going to make it go very easy and very quickly for me. If your butter was in the refrigerator, it would take a little bit longer for you to break it up. So I'm just going to continue to move these ingredients around until I have them all mixed to form the crumbs for the top of my pie. My dough is chilled for about 15 minutes. So from now I'm going to go ahead and try to roll out my pie dough. So I'm going to take a little bit of my flour. I'm just going to cast it onto my tabletop or my bench. I'm going to take a little flour and flour my pin. Get myself ready to start rolling. So I'm going to unwrap my pie dough. Before I start, I just want to work this round. All right, I'm going to put a little bit more down and a little bit on top. When you're rolling out pie dough, you want to make sure that you use enough flour, but not too much as to make it dry. So we're going to go ahead and start rolling. I always encourage students to just constantly make sure that the dough is free and moving. All right, so we're going to go ahead and roll one direction. We're going to turn it, make sure we're free. Maybe put a little bit more flour underneath. Want to make sure that our pin is nice and clean. We don't pick up any dough from that. We're going to go ahead and keep rolling, and our goal is to roll it the shape of our pie tin. So we're going to go ahead and keep rolling, turning it back and forth, and do the same thing, and trying to get that diameter of what we need. So we're almost there. I'll turn it one more time. All right, and now I'm gonna eye it up. As you can see, I have it the size of what I need it to be. A little bit thick on the ends here, so I'm just gonna make sure that I roll them out as well. I can get rid of my dusting flour, and I can go ahead and continue rolling out those last bit of ends. So there are 2 ways to transfer the dough from here into my pie tin. One is by taking it and putting it on your pin and rolling it up. Another way is since I only have one pie here, is to take it, fold it in half, move my pie tin over, try not to grab here or crease that. Lift it up, fold it over, and then flip it over this way. Now the next step I want to do is I want to do lifting and tucking. So I'm going to lift the pie dough up and I'm going to slowly tuck it into the pie tin, like so. Lift and tuck all the way around, right? Then once I have it lined in my pie shell, I'm going to go ahead and cut it. And I'm going to use a rocking motion with my bench knife and just slowly cut pie dough until I come back to where I started. I'm gonna take this scrap dough, and this is gonna be used to make my pie shell for my chocolate cream pie in another demo that I'm going to do. Now I wanna show you how to flute. I'm gonna use my thumb and my fingers and in a push method around the rim. This is where I'm gonna need my flour again. I'm gonna dip my thumb and my finger on the other hand, and I'm going to push, turn, push, and turn. Again, creating the zigzag effect. I'm gonna work my way all the way around until I get to where I started. Same technique. Some students like to lift this up and push. It's not what you want to do. You want to squeeze it and crimp the dough all the way around. Now some would say, why do you need to do a flute if you're doing a crumb pie? You don't necessarily, but I wanted to show you how to flute for this presentation. So I rolled out my last pie shell and it used up all the dough, so I had to piece in a little bit, but I want to show you a different technique. It's taking your fingers like so and pinch and turn, and it just gives you a different flair of fluting. So I'm going to do this all the way around, and I just wanted to show you a different technique. And it's just grabbing and turning the dough just slightly. It almost gives you a spiral effect around the pie. So there's one with that technique, and then there's one with this technique. And then this one I'm going to use in a later demonstration for a chocolate cream pie. This one I'm going to dock, put parchment paper in it, put pie weights in it, and bake it till it's done. And then I'm going to make the chocolate filling to go inside of that. This one I'm going to put the cherry pie filling in that I weighed, top it with crumbs, and put it in the oven. And this is the next thing we're going to do. In pastry arts, we're always worried about making sure that we're consistent and everything is exactly the same, especially when it goes into a case. So when it comes to pies, we want to make sure that each pie is exactly the same weight to make sure that we're keeping control of our food costs. So I'm going to take the pie and put it on my scale. I'm going to tear out the weight of the tin and the dough. Then I'm going to take my cherry pie filling and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to fill my pie shell with the correct amount of filling. And for this demonstration, I want to hit it so it's about 1 pound, 12 ounces. And that's where I'm at right now. 1 pound, 12 ounces. From that stage, I'm going to take it, I'm going to push my scale off to the side, I'm going to take my pie crumbs, and I'm going to slowly build crumbs around the outside edge. The goal is to make sure that I leave my center open for two reasons. One, for venting, and one, you can also then tell what type of pie or what flavor of pie that you ended up making. Because when we make these in commercial kitchens, we won't be just doing one pie, we'll be doing several. So we'll continue this until we have it completely covered over the top. Even want to make sure I get these last bits on here. I'm going to transfer it from there onto my sheet pan. From here, we're going to go ahead and make sure that I have my pie crumbs evenly spread. Then I'm going to go ahead and put it in the oven and bake it at a 425-degree oven for about 30 to 40 minutes. If it's in a standard oven, it'll be more like an hour. Here's the completed cherry crumb pie that was done today. I showed you how to make the pie dough, the pie crumbs, showed you the importance of weighing it out correctly, the filling to make sure that all your pies are even. It took about 40 minutes in a convection oven at 425.